Oral questions, questions orales, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The question is for the Prime Minister, the Liberal Prime Minister. 5 days after learning that Canada is the only G7 country in a recession, the Prime Minister finally decided to take a question from the media and offer new excuses. He said that the reason that we're in a recession is because immigration is too low, and if we look at GDP per capita, things are very good. GDP per capita has gone up by 0.2%. 0.2%. Is the Prime Minister expecting a parade for that result? The Honourable Minister of Industry. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister answers questions instead of insulting media, first point. Second point is that it's important to understand that our plan is working. Exports to outside of the United States have increased. They are doubling. And if you look at salaries, salaries are going up constantly compared to inflation. And what's more is we're seeing that Canada is the destination within the G7 for foreign investment. So we can see that our plan is working.
The Leader of the Opposition.
The growth rate for GDP per capita is as high as the Prime Minister's participation in question period, Mr. Speaker. He's avoiding answering questions about the fact that we're the only G7 country under his leadership in recession. Today, he said that investment in Canada has gone up in the last 2 quarters. But let's look at StatsCan's report. In the first quarter of 2026, capital investments in businesses went down by 0.7% for the 5th time in a row. Why is the Prime Minister spreading false information?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, we have a plan, and we are also facing headwinds. It's clear that with the tariff threat, the war in the Middle East and the war in Europe, Canada is facing headwinds. But we have a plan. Our plan is working. We have a plan for defense, to spend money here in Canada. We have a plan for industry, and the purchasing of materials by businesses has gone up. We have a plan for major projects. The real question is, why is the Leader of the Opposition, why does he seem so happy? Why is he celebrating that Canada is facing headwinds, and why isn't he tabling his plan?
Mr. Speaker, the question is for the Prime Minister. We don't need more excuses. He's delivered the only recession in the G7. Mexico is not in recession. They are just as integrated with the United States and share a border with that country. So the Prime Minister finally emerged to take media questions on his recession today, and he blamed it on the fact that immigration, he claims, is not high enough and that per capita GDP is actually not so bad. Only problem is, in the last year, per capita GDP has only grown by 0.2%.
Oh, wow.
0.2%. Does he really expect a parade for 0.2%?
The Honourable Minister of Energy and Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians understand, all Canadians understand, except for the Leader of the Opposition, that we have the most integrated economy in the world with the Americans. They understand our economy continues to show resilience in the face of illegal and unjustified tariffs. They understand we are facing 2 global economy-destroying wars. What Canadians want is us to work to build, not to talk down Canada. That's why we're building nuclear. That's why we're building transmission. That's why we're building ports. That's why we're building roads. We could keep going. They should stop.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
They're building a recession and they're building excuses, Mr. Speaker.
That's right.
The fact is, all other G7 countries face tariffs and global wars. Mexico is just as, if not more, integrated with the United States, and none of those other countries are in a recession. Only this Liberal Prime Minister has delivered that. After 5 days, he finally emerged to talk to the media after hiding from answering questions and blamed the recession on the fact that he says that immigration is not high enough. Mr. Speaker, Per capita GDP is 0.2% increase. Why the failure?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition has some kind of phony and artificial narrative. I don't know where he's drawing this from. He picks up pieces of information, he tries to weave it together. You know what's interesting, Mr. Speaker? He has no plan. He has nothing to say. The last time he had a plan, he told Canadians to go invest in cryptocurrency. For God's sake. Yeah, look at it exactly. Let's take a look at where that's at, Mr. Speaker. So why doesn't he get up and give us a real plan instead of running down this incredible country? Build this country forward. Build it up.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, the question was for the Liberal Prime Minister. This Prime Minister said experience shows that when an economy enters recession, the poorest are hit the hardest. And the lower-skilled, lower-paid people tend to lose their jobs first. And recessions disproportionately affect young. Graduating in a recession is generally bad news for someone's earnings. In the extreme, prolonged recessions, they can lead to permanent labor market scarring with potentially devastating effects on livelihoods, identities, and communities. This is people's lives. This Prime Minister caused this painful recession. Will he show up, stand up, and own up?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Well, thanks, Mr. Speaker. Do you know what Canadians are excited about? Canadians are excited about building up this country, building Canada strong, whether it's things like a new NORAD base, whether it's things like a new wind project or mining projects in my neck of the woods in Northern Ontario, Mr. Speaker, new ports, new opportunities for people to participate in the skilled trades. Every opportunity that Canadians have, these guys talk down, Mr. Speaker. Canadian workers are tired of being undermined in this place. They know we have their back. They know we're building big, and they're going to do it with us.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, Canadian workers are tired, Mr. Speaker. They're tired of working 6 days a week and not able to afford their rent. They're tired of showing up at the grocery store and having to hand products back at the checkout because they can't afford to pay them. They're tired of making their way over to the food bank and finding that the food bank is empty. They're tired of a Prime Minister who causes this recession and then does not have the courage or the decency to show up in the House of Commons and take ownership for what he does.
I was expecting that on the last question because then I couldn't remove a question from the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, last year Canadian exports to non-U.S. markets grew by more than 17%. Canada is the fastest growing economy, secondly speaking, in the G7 this year and next. And in the first 4 months of this year alone, we secured more than $10 billion in commercial deals for Canadian businesses. Speaking of infrastructure investments, Mr. Speaker, Kissy Lissams, Mackenzie Highway, Contra Coeur, Canada was ranked the world's most attractive destination for foreign direct investment. Mr. Speaker, there's a reason we are building Canada strong.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, we were promised that in June 2025, the tariff crisis would be fixed, but it's been a failure. But it's not the Prime Minister's fault, it's the fault of Donald Trump. 1 year of excuses later, we're at the same point, and the Prime Minister now wants a 16-year agreement. I agree, that's fine, except that it's certainly going to take a little bit more than 2 weeks to get it. In the meantime, will the government help small and medium-sized businesses with wage subsidies that would preserve expertise and jobs in Quebec? The Honourable Minister of Industry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we are there for our businesses, particularly our SMEs, in Quebec and across the country. And a month ago, we announced new funding, $1.5 billion for the steel, aluminum, and copper sectors. I've been in contact with many players in Quebec and across the country. They are very happy with our aid measures. And in the meantime, what we're doing, while the Minister of Canada-U.S. Relations is in Washington, we are going to be there for not just any agreement, but a good agreement. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. In all of that, there's not what everybody on the ground is asking for, a wage subsidy program, which would maintain jobs, it would preserve expertise in businesses, and it would mean that foreign workers wouldn't have to be sent home. We could keep their expertise, but there's nothing on that subject, nothing for those businesses. By the same token, in the meantime, our forestry sector is in danger and our sawmills are closing. Will the government, in the same spirit, apply the cost-neutral solution proposed by the forestry sector to buy back softwood lumber exports? The Honourable Government House Leader. Obviously, Mr. Speaker, we are going to be there for our forestry sector, as we have been there for the aluminum and auto sectors and the steel sector. We are facing headwinds right now in the trade relationship with the United States, but we're always going to be there to help people. And as proof of that, the Prime Minister is in Quebec today, or rather will be in Quebec later today, to speak about investments of billions of dollars in big and small communities in Quebec in infrastructure. We will always be there for Quebecers and for communities. The Honourable Member for Joliette-Manawan. Mr. Speaker, the tariff crisis has just forced the largest employer in the Matawan region to file for bankruptcy protection. The Saint-Michel sawmill and its 250 jobs need immediate debt-free liquidity. Otherwise, it's all over for them. The Bloc Québécois had warned the government that its support measures for the forestry sector would not be enough. Ottawa must buy back 50% of the countervailing and anti-dumping duties paid by our local businesses. It's a cost-free measure for the government, but it's one that can save companies like the Saint-Michel sawmill. When will the government understand that urgent action is needed? The Honourable Minister of Industry. Mr. Speaker, our thoughts are obviously with the workers in Saint-Michel because we know it's a very difficult moment for the forestry sector across the country. And that's why we are going to be there. We know that right now we have a plan for steel, aluminum, and copper, which is very good under the circumstances where we're facing unjustified tariffs. But we are working, and the Natural Resources Minister is working with me to make sure that these products will also be available to the forestry sector, and I'll work with my colleague on that because we need to save communities across the country.
The Prime Minister wants Canadians to believe that this recession is the fault of the world. Tariffs, energy prices, global uncertainty, all convenient Liberal excuses. But every nation in the G7 faced those same conditions, and yet Canada alone has fallen into a recession. $20 billion in net investment has fled this country under his watch. That is a failure of Liberal economic policy. So if the world is to blame, then why is Canada the only G7 country in a recession?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, clearly that member, that leader, is missing in action again when it comes to anything constructive with respect to the economy. Where is he? Where is he today with anything constructive? Canadians do not want political theater. They want a government that serious about this economy. We are going to diversify our trade. We're going to build major projects, and we are going to invest in unions and workers. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we are serious about building an economy, the strongest economy in the G7. That leader is missing in action again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, let's try to stay away from metaphors. The honourable member for Newmarket Aurora.
The member can spin, deflect, and dress this issue up however he likes. But why should Canadians believe that this Liberal government's promises about the future are true when the numbers today prove that they cannot manage the present? Canada is the only G7 country in a recession. The Prime Minister himself told Canadians that we have the best deal in the world with the U.S. Oil prices are surging. Canada should be thriving. Instead, our economy has contracted 3 out of the last 4 quarters. So I ask again, if the world is to blame, then why?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, a newsflash for that leader and that party opposite. We are in a trade war. We are facing economic headwinds. Canadians do not want political theater that leader loves. Let's listen to the chief economist of Scotiabank, who characterizes his behavior as irresponsible. On this side of the House, we are going to build an economy for all Canadians. We are going to invest in infrastructure, in defense, in housing, in major projects. We will build Canada strong, a Canada for everyone. He's missing in action. Where is he?
I mean, you know, I know people are being very clever, but let's try not to be. The honourable member for Terra Nova, the Peninsula.
Mr. Speaker, a recession, 2 consecutive quarters of economic decline. This Prime Minister has had 3 of his 4 quarters in decline. That puts Canada as the only G7 country in recession. And while the Liberals are in denial, the facts don't lie. There are more small businesses in Canada closing than opening. More than half of small business owners do not recommend opening a business. When will these Liberals at least admit that their policies put Canada into a recession?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans.
Speaker, I want to celebrate the apprenticeship program, a program that's focused on getting young people trained, Red Seal status, with support every step along that process. We are building the economy, almost $1 billion in small craft harbors, support our rural communities, also economic boosts for communities. That's what Canadians expect, and that's what we're delivering.
The honourable member for Terra Nova, the Peninsula.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think those words are very comforting to the apprentices or to the 112,000 people who lost their jobs in the past 3 months. Mortgage defaults are growing year over year. Canadian households are having the highest debt in the G7. Insolvencies hit their highest since 2009. $20 billion have fled this country. How much more data do they need before they realize that whatever this Prime Minister is pretending to do is not working?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans.
I want to remind the member in opposition from Newfoundland and Labrador that we are working closely with the Conservative provincial government to build the province together. Bay du Nord, $8 billion in Goose Bay, 5-wing Goose Bay, to expand the capacity of the base, but also this support moves out into the broader region. The work continues. Housing initiatives, on it goes. An announcement today from the Finance Minister in Newfoundland and Labrador. That's what Newfoundlanders and Labradorians and Canadians expect us to do. That's what we're doing. Laser focused.
The honourable member for Elgin St. Thomas, London South.
Mr. Speaker, it wasn't last that long ago, this Prime Minister got up and said he was the grand economist that would turn things around, the guy you could go to in a crisis. Well, here we are, Canada, the only G7 country in a recession, and where is he? Nowhere to be found. Runs from a reporter to ask about it, doesn't rise in this House of Commons to speak to it. Well, Canadians are suffering and struggling and paying the price. When will this Prime Minister admit that Canada is in a recession and he is the one to blame?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, I think it's time to get serious. I think members of opposite know that Canadians know that we're in very uncertain economic times, that we're engaged in a trade war that is not of our making, and that is why this Prime Minister and this government has a plan. That is why we're so focused on diversifying our trade, engaging in free trade agreements with countries around the world. That is why, Speaker, we're selling uranium to India. That is why we're selling planes to Malaysia. We're selling canola to China. Our plan is working. We'll keep working hard to make sure that we're creating good paying jobs for all Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Elgin, St. Thomas, London South.
Mr. Speaker, we're never going to get to net zero with that level of gaslighting. My goodness, the London Economic Region, which includes Elgin and St. Thomas, has the highest unemployment rate in Canada at 9.2%. 1,800 jobs lost. Does he expect me to go to my constituents and say, don't worry, you can sell all that uranium you've been working on? Families are struggling, families are suffering. This government keeps spending more and more money and won't even acknowledge the consequences of their action. When are they going to get serious and account for the fact that they have put Canada into a recession and the only country in the G7 to be there?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade.
Speaker, the members opposite can be as gleeful and as jovial as they want to, but Canadians know that this is a very serious moment in our country. That is why they require serious leadership. That is why they've elected a leader and a party that has a plan to diversify our economy, to make sure that not only we engage with the United States and Mexico and get the best deal possible for our country, we also build bridges and new partnerships around the world. China, India, Southeast Asia, Mercosur. That's where our focus is, Speaker, and we will not stop until we create good paying jobs for all Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Heritage.
Don't believe them when they say that we have the fastest growing economy in the G7. We're the only one in recession. Try telling that to the mom skipping meals so her children won't. Tell that to grandma at the food bank who's just trying to put Sunday dinner on the table. Tell that to the student whose future has been stolen. 112,000 jobs gone. $1 trillion of investment gone. $670 billion in generational jobs gone. It's not wars. It's not tariffs. It's a Prime Minister's record. What Liberal will get up to defend that?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Labour.
We're proud to stand up for our record every day in this House of Commons because that member knows very well that we're in the middle of a trade war. This country is facing headwinds, Mr. Speaker, but we have a plan. Mr. Speaker, Canada is building from LNG in BC to critical minerals in the prairies to nuclear and transit in Ontario, Mr. Speaker, to ports and mining in Quebec to offshore energy in Atlantic Canada, Mr. Speaker. This is how you create good jobs, great opportunities in the skilled trades, good union jobs, Mr. Speaker. We're building a Canada strong for all.
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, it's one setback after another when it comes to fighting climate change. To the point that the outgoing member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie has come to the worst possible conclusion, and I'll quote him on Cube Radio. We'll see that with the setbacks that we've experienced this year, the United States under Donald Trump are doing more to fight climate change than Canada. Mr. Speaker, at the end of the year, according to that member, Donald Trump's record will be better than that of the so-called Green Banker. And the Prime Minister just shrugs his shoulders and says, that's life. How can the Liberals defend this? The Honourable Secretary of State for Nature. Mr. Speaker, we are defending all of the positions that we take because we know that in the conditions right now, they are the best positions that we can take to make sure that we defend our economic sovereignty, but also the survival of our planet. What we've done with our nature plan is going to have a major impact on biodiversity and also on climate change. The methane regulations will have a major impact on reducing pollution for the fossil fuel sector. the EV vehicle sector is going to have a major impact as well. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, Thursday in committee, the Liberals proved that they haven't calculated the impact of all their setbacks when it comes to meeting their climate targets. They don't have the numbers. The so-called green banker, well, he didn't even take the time to count how much his setbacks are hurting us. But the outgoing MP for Laurier Sainte Marie believes that when we see those numbers, we're going to see that Canada's record is going to be worse than that of the United States under Donald Trump. If the minister disagrees, well, it's simple. She just has to show numbers that contradict that member. When will we see? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. Well, the member is interested in numbers. I'll give him a couple of numbers. We have the strengthened methane regulations. That's 400 megatons in reductions. If he wants to talk about what we've done for climate and climate change at the international level, we are a leader when it comes to work at the international level to support the fight against climate change. If he wants to talk about what we're doing with electric vehicles, well, we're seeing a major increase in EV sales, and it's because of our government has made changes. We're going to keep working. The Honourable Member for Richmond North Athabasca. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's sad to see Canada is the only G7 country in recession. 10 years of Liberal deficits. They've gone from $700 billion to $1.4 trillion in debt since they came to power. 10 years of inflationary spending and economic mismanagement. The result, 112,000 Canadians lost their jobs in just 3 months. Many Canadians are having a hard time paying their mortgages, paying for groceries. And we have 2 million Canadians who go to food banks every month. Can the Prime Minister recognize the Honourable Secretary of State for Children and Youth? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government has a plan to build a strong economy, a resilient economy. And we see it in the 8,000 jobs at Contrecoeur. We see it in the 1,000 jobs at New World Graphite. And we see at the same time that on Friday, 12 million Canadians will get the groceries and essentials benefit. It's an important step to help Canadians with the cost of living. We've also cut the gas tax, so we are there to build a strong future and a strong economy for all, and we're supporting Canadians through these difficult times. The Honourable Member for Richmond North Athabasca. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All G7 countries are facing the same challenges. Among them, Canada has the second highest unemployment rate. While Canadians are tightening their belts and while we're in a recession, Liberal waste is out of control. Examples, Curem. The budget was $1.75 billion. $6.6 billion is the real cost. Renting a piece of land that's worth $13,500 a year, the Liberals are paying $20 million a year. Why is the Prime Minister asking Canadian families to make sacrifices while the government's spending without counting? The Honourable Secretary of State. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We continue to be there for Canadian families. We're investing in a school food program to help families. That represents over $800 for a family that benefits from it per year. We also have a dental care plan that is helping Canadians and families with the costs of life. I'd also like to note that in my colleague's riding, there are over 32,000 people in his communities who are benefiting from dental care. It's a program that members across the way voted against, but that shows the impact that we're having to help Canadians and be there for them right now. The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister is the only G7 leader who's led his country into a recession. This recession is the result of a lack of leadership, uncontrolled spending, and high taxes, which are causing record job losses. Over the last 365 days, GDP has fallen by 0.6%, but Brookfield's stock has gone up by 19.56%. While the Prime Minister and his friends at Brookfield are getting richer, the people of the Beauce are getting poorer. Mr. Speaker, will the Liberal Prime Minister show leadership and take this crisis seriously?
L'honorable ministre.
The Honourable Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture. Mr. Speaker, we always take what's happening in Canada very seriously. What's not serious is the Conservatives' dialogue. For 10 years, they talked about productivity. In the last quarter, productivity was up, and they're saying nothing against it. It's hypocrisy, pure and simple. The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, all G7 countries are facing the same challenges, yet only the Liberals have driven the Canadian economy into recession. The Liberals are squandering taxpayers' money without a second thought. ArriveCan, budget $80 million. Actual $6.6 billion. And our Prime Minister is also spending a huge amount of money on travel, catering. When will the Prime Minister start managing Canadians' money responsibly? The Honourable Minister. I'll give him a concrete example, Mr. Speaker. The school food program, is he for it or against it? I'd like to hear him on that.
L'honorable député de Côte-du-Sud.
The Honourable Member for Côte-du-Sud, Rivière-du-Loup, Kataskomik-Témiscouata. Mr. Speaker, Canada is the only G7 country in a recession. Yesterday, my colleague across the way answered a question of mine trying to convince us that everything is working. Mr. Speaker, everything. But everybody in my region is saying they can't take it when they get to the grocery store shelves. They're not sure that they have enough money on a credit card or on their cards. How can this make any sense? A rich country like Canada has to count on food banks to feed its people? Explain that. The Secretary of State for Nature. Thank you for the question. Yes, it is working. It's working so well that when I meet with the people in my riding, they realize that we're working hard in extremely challenging circumstances. But these people that he's referring to, those who will receive the groceries and essentials benefit, they know they're getting that thanks to a decision we've made, but they didn't support, the Conservatives did not support that decision. When it comes to investments, they vote against those. Citizens here know that our approach is serious and will lead to results.
For Cumberland, Colchester.
Do you know what the difference is between this side of the House and that side of the House, Mr. Speaker? Conservatives wake up hoping for bad economic news that they can use to repeat pithy slogans, fire off fundraising emails, and talk down Canadian industries and Canadian workers. On this side of the House, we wake up knowing that Canadians are counting on us to build a stronger, more competitive, and more affordable economy. And that's exactly what we're doing. Can the Secretary of State for Financial Institutions update this House on how Canadian innovators, entrepreneurs, and workers are helping us navigate a rapidly changing world?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member from Cumberland, Colchester, for that great question. The last thing Canadians need right now is political theatre, and that is all they get from the leader of the Conservative Party. Political theatre and empty parking lot press conferences. We have a plan. We are going to diversify trade relationships. We are supercharging major projects. We are investing in workers. The plan is working. GDP is growing, and we are attracting federal direct investment at a pace not seen in decades. That's good news for Canadians, bad news for conservatives.
The Honourable Member for Battleford's Lloydminster Middle Lake.
Mr. Speaker, Canada is now the only G7 country in a recession, and Canadians are facing the real consequence of that reality. Demand at food banks continues to surge across the country, and Food Banks Canada is now reporting that millions of Canadians are facing historic levels of food insecurity. The fact is, 1 in 4 Canadians is now food insecure. If the Prime Minister says this recession is being driven by global energy markets and tariffs, why is Canada the only G7 country in a recession?
The Honourable Member, the Honourable Secretary of State for Rural Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think it's time that we celebrate Canada, Mr. Speaker. More good news. Canadian canola sales continue moving to supply the world. Canada potash needed everywhere, and Canada will deliver. Canada uranium sales to India is steady on. Canadian agribusiness is booming, and we'll continue doing what Canada needs. We'll stand up for our industries impacted by tariffs. We will protect our workers, Mr. Speaker. We'll stand up for our sovereignty. We have a job to do, Mr. Speaker. We will get it done.
The honourable member for Battleford, Lloydminster, Meadow Lake.
Well, Mr. Speaker, unlike that Secretary of State, Canadians do not get to ignore the reality of the recession caused by this Liberal government's terrible policies. Food Banks Canada is reporting that lower-income households are spending more than 100% of their income on basic essentials. Every other G7 country is facing the same global pressures, yet Canada is the only one in a recession. Why, Mr. Speaker, why are Canadians paying the price for this government's economic failures while every other G7 country has avoided recession?
The Honourable Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, I think it is very, very important that we protect and defend our country, Mr. Speaker. All we get from the Conservatives is negative, negative, negative. You need to stop talking down your country and start backing up Canada. The rest of the Canadians are doing that, Mr. Speaker. We've seen in Saskatchewan for 10 long years, those Conservative MPs sat on their hands doing nothing. And that's why the people of Saskatchewan are angry, Mr. Speaker. At the end of the day, you come to Ottawa to work. They have done nothing in 10 years. I've seen this government move more things in their 10 years in 1 year, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Cambridge.
Mr. Speaker, Canada is now the only G7 economy in a recession. It might be big news to the bankers and bureaucrats in Ottawa, but in my community, the warning lights have been flashing for months. The Cambridge Food Bank reports that hundreds of people with full-time jobs are using their services every month. These Liberals lecture hungry people about so-called global factors. But France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and UK all face tariff pressures from the US, and none of them are in a recession, just Canada. If our recession was about tariffs, war, and oil prices, then why is it that Canada is the only G7 economy in a recession right now?
The Honourable Minister for Women and Gender Equality, Tourism and Small Business.
Mr. Speaker, we recognize that Canadians are facing challenging times, and that is why our government is providing real relief for Canadians. Through the National School Food Program, we are feeding 400,000 kids healthy meals at school. Good news, Mr. Speaker, on Friday, Canadians are going to get the Canada Groceries and Essentials benefit. An average family of four will receive $1,900, Mr. Speaker. This is real relief providing to Canadians right now, Mr. Speaker.
Well done. The Honourable Member for Cambridge.
Mr. Speaker, that minister's cherry-picking skills will put even the best fruit farmer to shame. Over 100,000 jobs have been lost since the beginning of the year. Business investment has declined for 5 straight quarters, but the Liberal government pretends everything's fine. Families in my community have real questions about how they're going to make ends meet, put food on the table, or just keep their jobs. And this Liberal Prime Minister's response is to go into hiding. He's been dodging the cameras and our questions for 5 days. Now that we have a real economic crisis, why is this Liberal Prime Minister missing in action? And why is Canada the only G7 country in a recession?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'll point out that member is from the province of Ontario, continues to vote against supports in affordability to help Canadians. Let's talk about Ontario, Mr. Speaker. More than 4 million people have received the GST rebate, delivering $2.2 billion to Ontarians. And we're also helping first-time home buyers, Mr. Speaker. In the province of Ontario, that's an average of savings of up to $200,000 for first-time home buyers. We're going to help them with affordability. We're going to help them during these challenging times. And Mr. Speaker, that is how we're going to grow this Canada strong.
Exactly right.
The Honourable Member for Hamilton East Stony Creek.
I don't know if I'm in the House of Commons or the Twilight Zone. Last Thursday, this Liberal Prime Minister went around telling everyone we have the second fastest growing economy in the G7. But Friday, Statistics Canada reported that our economy shrank in 2 consecutive quarters. We are in a recession. Canada is the only G7 country in a recession. Today, Liberals are blaming it on tariffs and global conflicts. But if that's the case, why is no other G7 country facing these same headwinds in a recession?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Sport.
Mr. Speaker, only
the Conservatives think that global factors, yes, like wars and climate change and tariffs, are a conspiracy theory. Well, they're not a conspiracy theory. They do have an impact on our local economy. And what is our government doing? We're responding in ways that help Canadians, like the groceries and essentials benefit, which that member from Hamilton Stony Creek voted against. How about the 20,000 people in his riding that rely on the Canada Child Benefit, Mr. Speaker? He voted against that too. I suppose I'll congratulate the leader of the Conservative on one thing. He's managed to whip all those Conservatives up to only ask 4 questions in this entire period. At least they're consistent, Mr. Speaker.
Great job. The honourable member for Hamilton East Stony Creek.
Let me repeat to that out-of-touch Liberal, Canada is the only G7 country in a recession. That member has failed Canada. These Liberals have failed Canada. Parents in Hamilton want job security, a tariff deal, and paychecks that can afford groceries. The Stony Creek Food Bank is serving over 120 families per week. The Food Bank's Canada report card came out yesterday, and they got a D+. When will these Liberals stop gaslighting Canadians and start working for Canadians?
The Honourable Secretary of State.
On this side of the House, we are busy making jobs happen in Hamilton East Stony Creek while that member votes against policies that support families in his riding, like the Canada Child Benefit, like dental, like the groceries and essentials benefit, Mr. Speaker. That member is cherry-picking things out of the groceries and essentials benefit, and also from Food Banks Canada. He should be ashamed of himself, Mr. Speaker. We're following the instructions from Food Banks Canada. We're putting on the record that we're here to help get families with jobs, with the groceries and essentials benefit, while all those Conservatives can do is read the same tired speeches from their leader over and over and over again into the record while we're busy on this side helping Canadians.
The honourable member for Barrie Springwater, Oro Medonte.
Mr. Speaker, Canada is the only G7 country currently in a recession. This made-in-Canada recession has caused food bank usage to surge. In my community, the Barrie Food Bank is now supporting 8,000 clients per month, up from just 1,000 at the beginning of 2020. According to the Executive Director of the Barrie Food Bank, the organization recorded more than 8,000 visits in March alone. This represents a 12% year-over-year increase, including 377 first-time visits, up 30% from 2025. If Canada's recession were truly driven by global energy and tariff pressures, why is no other G7 country?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, all Canadians, including this government, are hoping for an end to the volatility that we've seen across the world. That does affect us in our local communities. But I hope that that member takes a moment to consider why he would have voted against the groceries and essentials benefit, which is being delivered to Canadians this Friday, Mr. Speaker. Over 40,000 constituents in his riding are going to receive that benefit. These are important supports, and the Conservatives continuously vote against the very measures that are there to deliver a more affordable life for Canadians.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
Yesterday, the Prime Minister delivered a speech on anti-Semitism so neutered that an anti-Semite would have given it a standing ovation. And his solution was a council. One includes a lawyer that went to court defending illegal encampments, a former minister whose organization lost federal funding for supporting Hamas and Hezbollah and then lobbied the former government to keep it off the terror list. And it's led now by a minister who wants to ban passages from the Bible and funded these same anti-Semites in his own department. Jewish Canadians are being attacked on the streets, and they're giving the keys to the very people that fueled the crisis. Okay. And I have one question for the Prime Minister. Is he serious?
The Honourable Minister for Artificial Intelligence and Digital Innovation.
There is a dangerous and serious crisis of anti-Semitism, and all the opposition can do is drive more division in the country when we do not need it most. At the very synagogue where I was bar mitzvahed, it was shot with 20 bullets. We do not need lessons from the opposition as to the seriousness. That is why it is a shame that the opposition opposed our anti-hate bill to protect campuses, places of worship, and community centers from this scourge of anti-Semitism. They should stop the divisive rhetoric and join us and protect all Canadians.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
Speaker, that minister should ask anyone in Canada or even the 100 Liberal donors that were in that room last night if they feel safer today. And the answer is no.
Exactly.
Because what we heard yesterday was hollow. Reviewing previous reviews, studying studies on a crisis that this government presided over, funded, and fueled. And that is not a plan. Nothing he said will stop the bullets from entering his own synagogue or the genocidal slogans that are uttered in the streets every single day against Canadians. So will the Prime Minister finally stand up in this House and meet the moment he so spectacularly failed?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, like all Canadians, I was proud to stand with the Prime Minister yesterday as he named the dangerous scourge of anti-Semitism, and he took action, not with divisive rhetoric. We have an anti-hate bill that will protect our places of worship, campuses, and community centers. We have put money to protect synagogues and camps, and instead of stoking division, instead of the hollow rhetoric, the opposition should stand with us and protect Jews who are facing unprecedented levels of anti-Semitism. Take some action.
The Honourable Member for Brome-Missisquoi. Mr. Speaker, we know that Conservatives never let facts get in the way of a good soundbite, but let's talk about some facts. The Canadian economy grew by an estimated 1.7% in 2025 and is projected to post the second highest growth rate among G7 countries in 2026 and 27. Fact, Canada has just reached an 18-year high and attracting foreign direct investment. Fact, you're never going to hear the Conservatives celebrate our economy and our workers. Can the Minister of Industry explain why? The Honourable Minister of Industry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for Brome-Missisquoi for his important question. You know, Canada is one of the most integrated economies, integrated with the United States. At the same time, we're dealing with a tariff war. In those tariffed sectors, despite all of that, we're seeing investments. Last Friday, in fact, along with the Premier of Quebec, Christine Fréchette, we inaugurated the new Rio Tinto plant in Saguenay to produce the best aluminum in the world, $100 million in the carbon neutral aluminum, and we can create jobs despite this.
Mr. Speaker, the temporary foreign worker program suppresses wages, creates poor working conditions, and kills entry-level jobs for our Canadian youth. Now, we've learned the Liberals spent $1.6 billion over the last 5 years to administer the TFW program and lost $500 million in the process. Instead of issuing 215,000 new foreign work permits this year, the Liberals should immediately abolish the TFW program and replace it with a fair deal for young workers, food-producing industries, and extremely low unemployment regions. When will the Liberal government abolish the expensive, wasteful, destructive temporary foreign worker program?
Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Mr. Speaker, the temporary foreign worker program is administered with three principles. First of all, to make sure that any Canadian that wants that job comes first. Second of all, to make sure that employers that are eligible for temporary foreign workers in areas where very tight employment exists can access workers to keep their businesses alive, something that many of that member's colleagues have written me to expand.
The Honourable Member for Saskatoon West.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals blew $500 million on the temporary foreign worker program in the last 5 years. Who spent that money? Let's see. That $500 million was spent while the Minister of Justice had the file. That $500 million was spent while the Minister of Identity and Culture was in the role. And the current Immigration Minister, well, she's on track to spend even more. That's quite the list of captains on the IRCC Titanic. Will the Prime Minister admit that he has lost control and finally put someone in charge who will stop issuing new foreign work permits and abolish the temporary foreign worker program?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Rural Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to point out several years ago, a couple of years ago, and the headline goes, Canadian Conservative Party launches petition to fast-track students. That was the member from Saskatoon West. So, Mr. Speaker, he has to come clean. He has to come clean. On the immigration piece, when it comes to the issue of the member, he must clarify who he is misleading. The voters back in Saskatoon or the people of Canada?
The honourable member for Mission Matsqui Abbotsford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In March, the government increased the temporary foreign worker program from 10 to 15% for thousands of work sites in remote and rural communities across Canada. At the same time, Canada lost 112,000 jobs in that same period of time. Youth unemployment rate was at 14.3%. So yes, in my order paper question yesterday, we did learn that the program for temporary foreign workers cost $1.6 billion with a net loss of $509 million. What will this government say to the hundreds of thousands of youth unemployed in this country when we're increasing the number of temporary foreign workers this year?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Mr. Speaker, that member's numbers are quite incorrect. In fact, temporary foreign worker use has declined. In fact, so much so that large corporations that many of his colleagues continue to advocate for are actually now focused entirely on Canadian talent. And that's the way it should be, Mr. Speaker. And that's why we've taken these actions. It's much harder for employers to hire workers, temporary foreign workers, in regions with high employment rates, in regions where people are looking for work. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, this work is what we're doing despite the advocacy of many of that person's colleagues. Maybe they can get their messaging clear.
The honourable member for Winnipeg South.
Mr. Speaker, for far too long, First Nations leaders and communities in Ontario have called for a child and family services system that reflects their cultures, their priorities, and the right to care for their own children. Can the Minister of Indigenous Services update the House on the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal's decision regarding the Ontario Final Agreement and how this historic milestone advances First Nations-led child and family services reform?
Minister for Indigenous Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague for that important question. I want to sincerely congratulate the Chiefs of Ontario, the Anishinaabe Nation, and the Ontario First Nations who have worked tirelessly to be the ones making the decisions for their own children. On May 29th, we honored the start of this work based in not only culture, but also in ceremony to undertake this work. Through this historic investment, $8.5 billion is going to mean predictable, stable funding. It's also going to ensure that prevention efforts are priority. We are supporting this critical work. We are committed to continuing.
The honourable member for Edmonton Southeast.
Canada is the only country in the G7 in recession. This is nothing technical about coming home from work and telling your kids that you no longer have a job. Canada's economy has shrunk from 2 quarters in a row. Business investment is falling. Food bank use is all-time high. This is not a technical recession. This is a full-blown liberal recession. If global factors are to blame, then why is Canada the only G7 country in recession?
Great question.
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, we are creating over 1,000 jobs through Nouveau Monde Graphite, supporting 18,000 construction jobs, and the Darlington Nuclear Project is supporting 18,000 construction jobs. Mr. Speaker, this is just an example of the type of investments that the Government of Canada is putting into the Canadian economy. Just recently, we secured the largest order of Canadian-built aircraft in our history, 150 Airbus A220s built by Canadian workers. At a time when Canada is facing a trade war, we're building, we're investing.
The honourable member for Kootenay Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, ferries are essential highways for coastal communities. Of course, we support strong federal funding for ferry services in Atlantic Canada. However, BC Ferries receives only $1.63 per passenger in federal operational support compared to about $291 per passenger in Atlantic Canada. Temporary relief measures and repayable loans for BC can't replace fair, long-term federal operational support. When will this Liberal government finally modernize these outdated agreements and provide fair support for British Columbia and BC Ferries?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We thank the member for his advocacy for British Columbia. I am aware that the letter he sent to the department has been received. We are looking forward to having conversations about how we can continue to invest in British Columbia, how we can continue to invest in Canada. We were elected with a mandate to build Canada strong, and we will proceed with doing that.
The honourable member for Vancouver East.
I asked the immigration minister if she would do what France, Ireland, Belgium, and Germany had done, evacuate 130 Palestinian students with university acceptance and scholarships with deferred biometrics and grant them emergency travel documents. The minister said, quote, "We have directed officials to accelerate the student visa processing for people in Gaza, and I can confirm the decision will be made now, and in fact, all will be completed in the next 10 days. I'm now learning that is not true. Either the minister was deliberately misleading or inept and has no clue what's going on. Will the Prime Minister just fire her already?"
The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We remain committed to what we have promised. Despite significant challenges, Canadians need to know that over 1,400 Gazans have arrived in Canada. Through our programs, I've directed my department to accelerate decisions on study permit for Palestinian students who have been able to exit. They are being interviewed and final decisions are being made. We will continue processing applications while upholding the requirements to protect our immigration system and those that it serves. Thank you.
Je voudrais signaler.
I would like to note the presence of His Excellency, Mr. Claude Wiesler, President of the Chamber of Deputies of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg.